Benvenuti al Treviso Città Impresa 2025. Sono qui per presentarvi la prima edizione trevigiana del festival dedicato ai territori industriali del nostro paese. Competere oltre i nuovi confini è il titolo di questa edizione e sarà l'occasione per riflettere sulla fine di un lungo ciclo di crescita del multilateralismo e sull'inizio di una fase opposta. Quali saranno le conseguenze della revisione delle catene del valore dettata da nuovi equilibri geopolitici? Come incideranno il crescente ricorso al Golden Power e il ritorno dei dazi sulle strategie di crescita delle imprese? Quali impatti ci saranno per il nostro sistema economico e sociale? Per analizzare questi cambiamenti, i più autorevoli economisti, imprenditori e osservatori delle dinamiche globali sono qui con noi al festival per offrire il loro punto di vista e aiutarci a comprendere gli scenari che ci attendono. Sarà questo il filo conduttore di Treviso Città Impresa, che approfondirà nello specifico l'evoluzione delle strategie aziendali di fronte a un contesto in trasformazione. Con esperti, imprenditori e figure istituzionali si discuterà di geopolitica, economia, dazi e confini, con focus su opportunità e rischi nei mercati emergenti e nelle filiere produttive. Il programma ospiterà, inoltre, la prima fase del Premio Letteratura d'Impresa. All'esterno delle sale, infine, troverete tutte le pubblicazioni degli autori del festival. Prima di dare il benvenuto agli ospiti del prossimo evento, lasciatemi ringraziare, a nome dei promotori del festival, il main partner per il sostegno alla manifestazione. Ringraziamo anche i partner, i supporter ed i contributor, che hanno collaborato con noi alla realizzazione di questa edizione. Infine, ringraziamo anche i partner tecnici del festival. Un'ultima nota. Ricordatevi anche di controllare il programma aggiornato degli eventi sul sito festivalcittaimpresa.it. Buon ascolto e buon festival!
Buongiorno, sono Marco. Questo è un messaggio per chi non parla inglese. Il prossimo evento si terrà in lingua inglese, ma potrete seguire la traduzione, realizzata con l'intelligenza artificiale, direttamente dal vostro smartphone. Vi rubo qualche secondo per spiegarvi come funziona. Per prima cosa, prendete il vostro smartphone e inquadrate il codice QR che vedete nel video. In questo modo potrete scaricare sul vostro cellulare l'app di Interprefy con cui viene gestita la traduzione. Vi lascio ancora un secondo per inquadrare il codice QR. Dopo aver scansionato il codice QR, si aprirà l'app. Scrivete iTranslation, in minuscolo e tutto attaccato, nel riquadro al centro e fate tap sulla scritta Connect in basso. Questa è la vostra schermata operativa. Facendo tap in basso a sinistra, sulla scritta English indicata dal riquadro, si aprirà una schermata che vi permette di scegliere l'audio della lingua di preferenza, inglese o italiano. Usate le vostre cuffie e ascoltate la lingua originale o la versione tradotta dall'intelligenza artificiale. Facendo tap in basso a destra, sulla scritta CC indicata dal riquadro, potrete invece scegliere di attivare i sottotitoli e leggere la trascrizione della lingua originale o della lingua tradotta con l'intelligenza artificiale. Per uscire dalla app sarà sufficiente fare tap sul simbolo in alto a sinistra indicato dal riquadro e poi cliccare su Leave. Vi faccio vedere ancora una volta il codice QR per accedere all'app. La traduzione con intelligenza artificiale è in continuo sviluppo. Vi invitiamo a usare questo servizio per contribuire a migliorarlo. Grazie.
Hello, welcome. Avete scaricato tutti l'app? Tutti pronti? Possiamo procedere? So I'm really happy. I'm looking forward to this 1 hour and 50 minutes. 1 hour which will be dedicated to our conversation with Wolfgang Münchau, and then I will leave the floor for questions. For 15 minutes you will have the opportunity to pose questions to a great journalist that I've been following for many years, because Wolfgang Münchau has been a brilliant and extraordinary commentator and editorialist for the Financial Times. He has been also the co-founder of a newspaper which I was very sad when it closed in Germany. It's the Financial Times Deutschland. It was one of the few newspapers in Germany that hadn't an ordoliberal stance, so I was always very happy to read it, but unfortunately it doesn't exist anymore. And now he is co-founder and director of Eurointelligence, a think tank, a very important think tank. So I'm very happy to be here with Wolfgang Münchau. He wrote a book with a very explicit title, Kaput. Kaput, everybody knows in Italy what it means because there was also a big novel, a very important novel of the Second World War. And it was an expression that was very used, and it was one of the few expressions that every Italian knows. It means destroyed. And the reference is to the German economy. But before going into the book, which is a really, really interesting book, and where you read things that you wouldn't read in any German newspaper, and very few German newspapers, I would start from the latest news, which are big news. Because in Germany, there's a Copernican revolution happening in these days. Next Tuesday, it will be a historical day eventually, because the CDU of Friedrich Merz, the probable future chancellor, will vote together with the SPD and the CDU and the Greens a very, very important law. In reality, it's 3 laws. They will change the constitution with 2/3 of the majority to change a law that has, in a certain sense, been the symbol of Germany in the last 15 years, symbol of the austerity, which is the debt brake, the Schuldenbremse. And they will change this law because the future government wants to invest 500 billion euros in infrastructure, in school, in hospitals, and so on. And they want to allow also the next government to spend more than 1% of GDP for defense outside this budget band. So I remember, Wolfgang Münchau, that you wrote a column when the Schuldenbremse was approved as a constitutional law in 2009, so 16 years ago. And you were one of the few Germans, I think the only German, but one of the few journalists who wrote a very, very doom comment, and you wrote that this debt brake, this constitutional cap was the end, could mean the end of Europe. So I said it became then the symbol of the German austerity. What do you think now? Is the austerity over? Is Europe safer now? Or will it be?
Yeah, Tonia, the austerity is over. That period has ended. That we can definitely say. You can't.
Yes.
Okay, better like this. I say the austerity is over. I think that's clear. This is that's why it's a historic moment. Germany had austerity. The last government fell over austerity because there were 3 parties and 2 wanted to spend more and the other one didn't, and they fell. And this is why Olaf Scholz his government collapsed. And the new government is what they call a grand coalition. These are the main parties of the center-right and the center-left. They have now formed a coalition, or they will form a coalition, and they realized in order to do what they want to do and what they need to do, they need more money. And the debt brake collapsed because it was not sustainable. It's like so many things in life, when they're not sustainable, they end. And we always said it would end. It's not sustainable. What can they do? They would have had to abolish all welfare. They would have had to replace welfare with food stamps or something completely ridiculous. So the system collapsed. It was not sustainable. And and what sort of did it? And I think 2 weeks ago, it was not a very high probability for this to have happened. But what happened is J.D. Vance gave a speech in Munich, and everybody got freaked out about this. And then I think the thing that really did it, there was Zelensky in the Oval Office. And I think that was a moment when Germany, when the new German government realized America isn't on our side anymore. We can't rely on the United States. We got to spend a lot more money on defense. This is not just 0.5 percentage points of GDP. This is big. And what they decided is we have to take defense out of the debt rules, and that will also happen in Europe. And I think it will happen in Europe in the same way as it happens in Germany. So I think it's now anything above 1%, basically everybody, because everybody is above that ceiling. So Italy, Spain, everybody can now spend more money on defense if they want to. And it will not count towards the debt rules. Now, obviously, the difference is that Germany has more space, fiscal space, because one of the advantages of 15 years of austerity is they have very low debt. So they have left themselves the room for maneuver, whereas Italy does not have that room for maneuver. I don't think Italy can afford doing what Germany is doing, like spending all the money, but at least there's no rule against it now. There wouldn't be a backlash against this. So in that sense, it's a very big news, and it's sort of changing the way the economy works. But there are also a number of buts here. So but we can talk about these later. But if the question is austerity over, then the answer is yes, it is. If the question is Germany no longer kaput, then the answer is no, it's still kaput. That's a different story.
When we read about the crisis, it's worth remembering that Germany has faced 2 years of recession. This happened only once after 1945, in 2002 and 2003, and The Economist made the famous cover, Segment of Europe. Wolfgang Münchau says, I don't care about these covers, because, this is like something that can happen sometimes, but we're talking about here about something, a very deep crisis, a structural crisis. And after reading your book, I would call it even an ideological crisis, right? Everybody is saying always, well, Germany depends too much on, or depended too much on Russian energy. Germany depended too much on exports to China. But it's a deeper problem that has to do with the technophobia, you say, and this neo-mercantilism, combined with the conservatism in the fiscal side, but this is over. So can you go into this, problem, which is really a philosophical problem, I would say?
No, absolutely. The Economist, the reason why I rejected this label sick man of Europe is because they always got this wrong. They always misjudged the cyclical and the structural one. And they placed a lot of emphasis when there was a cyclical crisis in 2003, 2005. In 2003, 2005, the German economy was essentially too expensive. They entered the euro at the wrong exchange rate. They were not competitive. And, a few things changed to make them more competitive. And they were quite lucky. Back in those days, we had the East European enlargement. And the German car industry was able to diversify into other countries. Part of its supply chains was offloaded to the Czech Republic, Slovakia, Poland, and they saved cost. The euro crisis was good for Germany because it led to a lower exchange rate. A real exchange rate devaluation happened, and they became more competitive. There were other things, like China was complementary. China was buying German products, plant and machinery, and China did not compete with Germany. China back in those days was competing with Italy, but it was not competing with Germany. That was then. Today that's changed. China is competing with Germany today. What else? Russian gas. Germany got very cheap gas from Russia. So things were pretty nice for Germany. So there were a lot of, Germany was like a gambler, and it was a long streak of good luck that lasted from 2005 to 2015. But the crisis was already there, because everything that's gone on since, the good luck turned into bad luck. The Russian thing wasn't so great. China switched to becoming a complementary trading partner to an adversarial trading partner. Putin invaded Ukraine. The German car industry fell behind in its technological development, as indeed the entire country fell behind, still stuck in the analog age of mechanical engineering. Germany didn't invest in 21st century technologies. And then the latest thing that happened is Donald Trump's tariffs. That's going to be terrible for the Germans because they are net exporters to the United States. So lots of good luck followed by lots of bad luck. But the problem started a long time ago. And the problem, and you mentioned the ideology behind it. And there is ideology that's part to do, the way we run the way we discuss the economy. All this austerity was part of an ideology. This is not like, there wasn't so much an economic theory behind it. It was basically people were austere because, that's sort of the Protestant ethic. It wasn't even argued. It was just basically of who we were, and that was the end of that. But the bigger problem that I see for the economy itself was the inflexibility, and they basically thought, the Germany, of the 20th century was a Germany of great engineering. The diesel engine was sort of the epitome of. That was the height of sophistication. The diesel engine, 1980s, 1990s, they developed this, and it was very sophisticated. And then they didn't see the digital revolution coming. The digital revolution, was American. It was based on, on a technology the Germans didn't understand, which was quantum physics. It was modern stuff, and in America it was mostly military applications in the 70s, and then came the PC. That was a nice business, and the Germans were not really interested in this kind of stuff because they made a lot of money with their industries. They didn't need to be in new industries because pharmaceuticals, chemicals, cars, mechanical engineering, they did extremely well. They thought they didn't need to expand. And that went on into the 21st century. Angela Merkel was disinterested. I mean, she's a physicist. She's got a PhD in physics, but she was not interested in the internet. She said in 2013 that the internet was new territory for Germany. I think we already had the iPhone 7 by then. Neuland, that was the word she was using, and then they did a number of attempts to connect with AI, artificial intelligence, but they didn't quite know what it was, and the programs were not particularly intelligent, and it is a long saga, and I think what happened is a mindset, a mentality. The Germans thought they were good at something, and they underestimated the others. And that was particular in the car industry. The car industry, mostly men, mostly sort of engineering types, they basically thought they are the masters of the universe. This is sort of a similar thing to Wall Street in the 1980s. They were sort of they were like the gods, and they thought they were in charge of the technology. They were in charge of tastes, and then. When Tesla came along, they thought this was a toy. This was a toy car. And they never took the Chinese seriously because the Chinese couldn't build cars. That was their view. And when the Chinese started to invest in electric cars, that was just, they laughed at this. And there was I write this in the book, the famous chairman of Volkswagen, Ferdinand Piëch. He was part of the Porsche family, very sort of, German industrial aristocracy. You can't get sort of more famous than he did. And he said, there is no space for electric cars in my garage. And this man had a very big garage. It's not like he had a small garage. He had, because there was a Volkswagen in the garage, there was an Audi in the garage, there was a Lamborghini. Was it Lamborghini or Maserati? He owns one of them. I think Lamborghini, and there was a Bentley in this garage, a Seat, so it was a big garage, but no space for electric cars, and that was basically the attitude. And obviously, if the big boss doesn't like electric cars, all the the underlings didn't like electric cars either, and it was basically there was no interest in this. After I wrote the book, I got an email from somebody. He said, I actually worked at Volkswagen in those years, and I actually designed an electric car for them. And they didn't want it. They had no interest in this. It was dismissed. And it was something like, it's sort of a mindset. And when they kind of woke up to this, it was too late. And they even at that point underestimated this. They said, oh yeah, we can do this in a year. We'll have that sorted. And then they started to realize how difficult this is, because it works very different. The engines are completely different. The technology today is in the battery, it's not in the engine. And for the next generation, if you look ahead, the big money in an electric car is the AI. It's the self-driving car, it's the intelligence. And they haven't got any of that. And I was in China, this funny story is when they were completely shocked that their electric car that they produced didn't sell. And the Chinese bought another type, one of their own, which had a karaoke machine inside the car. And you know, a German engineer would never dream of putting a karaoke machine inside a car. And I was told, you know, Chinese people work very long hours, and they often have very long way home, and that's basically their free time. So if they're in a group, they sing, and that's what they do, and because that's their only free time in a working week they have, and that's why it's important to have a bit of entertainment in the car. That wasn't part of their reality, and you could see they were culturally, technologically, basically on a completely wrong track. And you know, and that happens, you know, and you know, whenever a product gets invented, reinvented, that happens. You know, I think, you know, for the people who are older here in the room who remember typewriters, you know, that there was actually, when the computer came in the 1980s, I don't know whether you remember, I think you must have had similar things with Olivetti. And what the first generation of what the typewriter people did when the computers came, they put the computer into the typewriter. It was quite funny because the typewriters of that generation, they became electronic, and they had a little window, and they became little word processors. Not fully fledged, but you could write a sentence and then correct it and then commit and then write the next sentence. So it was a you know, a mini computer, and there was an American company called Smith Corona, which was one of the world's most successful typewriter makers, and they had their best year ever in 1989, and the computer had already been invented. I think the PC was already in second or third generation, and they thought they nailed it, and they thought they, you know, it's a bit like Volkswagen thought, oh yeah, we got the digital world in our cockpit, you know, that's what they did. They put digital inside of their cars. And I remember a manager once told me that, well, we are not the world champions at digital, but we are the world champions on combining the digital and the analog. And I believe them. They are very good, except that we don't want this. You know, our mobile phone, it doesn't combine it. It's just a digital. And the next car will be mostly digital. The analog bit, I mean, of course, it will still have wheels, you know? But it's a different product. You know, the electric car is, I called it in the book, I called it an iPad with wheels. It's at its core a digital device. It's not a car. Whereas the cars that we still use today is a different product from a different era. It's a car. And the managers of a digital company are very different from the managers of a car company. You could not confuse them. Volkswagen, and I'm sure you have the same here with Stellantis in Italy and France, Volkswagen always says, we are a software company. I can absolutely assure you that Volkswagen is not a software company. They are absolutely not. I mean, they pretend they want to be a software company, but this is just the way they're dressed. They all dress in suits. They all have limousines. You know, they have big offices. This is not a software company. You know, software companies are completely different people. They're much more, you know, they're younger. They're much more informal. You know, they don't use the polite form of addressing each other. They don't have works councils and unions and all this massive infrastructure. They don't have a golden share by the government, and they don't spend all the time with the politicians. No, Volkswagen is not a software company, and I think it's that delusion, and I think it's that inflexibility that hit the entirety of Germany. For example, another story is BASF, which is a famous chemical company. And BASF had discovered in about 10, 15 years ago that China is the future. But they didn't, and they started to invest in China like there's no tomorrow. I mean, BASF is now it's almost more Chinese these days than German. And as when Trump became president the first time, things changed politically. People were talking about China as a potential adversary. We started to look at Huawei. We looked at security, data security from China, and we sort of, the West started to get worried about China taking our businesses. In Germany, they took the entire solar panel industry away and moved it to China. They bought it and moved it to China. And so we suddenly realized this is not as friendly a partner as we thought it would be. This is, I wouldn't say hostile, but there was a certain adversarial behavior between China and Germany, and also, of course, between China and the United States. Now, at BSW, they didn't want to hear this. There was a member in the board of the company. She was not from Germany. I think she was from the United States. And she said, look, we should be careful about China. She had to go. She was basically, she was never seen again in the company. Because if you basically contradicted the official line of the company, you had no future there. And that was something, it's not a whistleblower culture. If you're a whistleblower in Germany, you are basically, we spoke about the Wirecard story where the Financial Times investigated a criminal German company, and the entire German system ganged up against the Financial Times. In the end, Financial Times was right. This was a criminal company. The head of the company is now actually in Moscow and is a spy. And this was one of the most criminal operations in Europe. This was this is an absolutely unbelievable. This wasn't just a fraud. This was just a geopolitical. This could have been a James Bond thriller. And the Germans tried to blame the Financial Times. You get these sort of, the kind of Lager mentality, the kind of, you're basically under attack. And I think that's what happened to Germany. Here's the digital world, and they became very defensive. They didn't sort of, it was that sort of mentality that, and everybody ganged up together. It's a consensus society. You always have the left and the right in government together. You don't have that in Italy so much. But in Germany, it's always the left and the right always together. It's a bit like the Draghi government, but all the time, basically. That's Germany, like you have that all the time.
And they don't differ very much if they're CDU or SPD. I mean, you said it. You say it very clearly in the book. I mean, Gerhard Schröder is a man who has had very early, very strong ties to Russia. If you look for the man of China in Germany, you must look to Olaf Scholz. So, I mean, this is a super interesting book also because, well, I think we could talk about these links a bit later. I wanted to go a bit deeper into something you said about the digital aspect, because I think this is key to a lot of things, no? You said it. I mean, the electric cars are basically, it's a car built around the computer, and this is something that the Germans didn't understand for a long time. When the Italian ambassador, Piero Benassi, came to Germany the first time, he said, oh my God, I mean, the connection for the Wi-Fi or for my telephone was better in Tunisia than here in Berlin. So, and also you said about this anecdote of the former industry minister, Peter Altmaier, who didn't want his telephone calls to be put through his hands to his smartphone because the line was everywhere was very bad. This is a huge problem because it's not only a problem that in Germany you can't make a phone call from as soon as you're in the countryside. Even in Berlin, you can't make a proper phone call, and many neighborhoods and spots and so on. And it is also, of course, a problem when you have a car which is totally digitalized, like a Chinese car or like the cars they're doing now. So I mean, and we were talking about the cultural basis. You say it started or it went very bad with the dot-com crisis, no? So, but I think it's even deeper, no? There is like a sort of suspect culture in Germany towards everything that is digital, that is in a certain sense could compromise your privacy, could be something, some surveillance on you. What is this? It's much worse than being late on the digital revolution. It's a cultural resistance to digital revolution.
There is a massive cultural resistance to the digital. I'll tell you two further anecdotes. One machine that's still popular in Germany is the fax machine. You have to be quite old to know what it is, but it's very popular. The Bundesbank still has a fax machine, and the police and the army still use the fax machine, and doctors use it. And my sister-in-law is a doctor, and I asked her why she uses the fax machines, and she says if she does a prescription, it's the only legal way to signal, because an email is in Germany not legal. It's not which is crazy. It's everywhere else, but it's sort of the laws behind it. And there was also another anecdote I have in the book, which is quite hilarious. There was a guy in the middle of a place where Friedrich Merz is from, the Sauerland, which is sort of in the middle, basically, in the middle of Germany. And he had the extremely slow, like an internet connection, the way it used to be like 10 years ago. And he was a photographer, and he wanted to upload pictures for a printer to be printed. And it wouldn't work. And what he did a competition. He would burn the thing to a CD or DVD, and then he would take his horse, because the man had a horse, and he would ride to the printer, which was 10 miles away or 10 kilometers away, and then go back. And while the thing was uploading on the internet, and the horse won the race against the internet, against the German internet. Which is an incredible story, but I mean, it's basically, and the question is, why is this? And why are they so? And obviously, the superficial reason is they didn't invest in it. That's clearly the case. But why didn't they invest in it? Then is the question. And there is sort of a mentality in Germany that is very much anti-digital. For example, one of the popular authors in Germany, much more popular than I will ever be, is a guy called Spitzer. And he is a professor of psychology, and he wrote a number of books about stating that the digital world makes you stupid. And he was, he wrote articles that they shouldn't touch digital in schools. This wasn't about mobile phones in schools. This is, there are good reasons to have children not use mobile phones in schools. I agree with that, actually. But he was about, teachers shouldn't be using any digital devices. They shouldn't teach digital things. So they shouldn't teach programming, or they shouldn't explain how a computer worked. And he was asked, but I mean, surely people should know how a computer works. It was an innocent question. He said, no, we don't teach people how to use drugs, do we? And you basically realize, oh my God, sort of this is quite emotional. Now, this isn't just saying, okay, Bill Gates didn't give a smartphone to his children because he felt they're better off without smartphones, and there's probably a case to be made for that. But this is different. This is like you're trying to deny the reality of the 21st century. You're trying to teach a reality of a different century. And, we kind of, there's a lot of in the cultural thing of keeping things as they are. This was like, you still, that people still like to learn Latin and Greek, and I'm all in favor of all these classical education. I had one myself. But it really is, there have been so many changes in this world to understand what's going on today, even in technical subjects like mathematics. You want to teach things like statistics and probability, if only to get people to understand or to tell the difference between a statistical lie and a statistical truth. It's not taught in Germany. It's taught. They're still teaching mostly sort of engineering mathematics, the stuff that they need for the classical, engineering careers and physics, and it. So there is I think there's culturally, Germany was successful in the 50s. Germany was successful pretty much from the 50s to the 80s and the 90s, and there is a sense of these were our sort of great times. We would like to hang on to this. Rather than diversify. The British have a bit of that. I live in the UK, and the British are still, their glory moment was the Second World War. And everything they do is Ukraine, Russia. This is the Second World War all over. Putin is the fascist, and Ukraine is the good guy. You have to help him. Very simple narratives. And if you look at the Russia-Ukraine war in the framework of World War II. It's simple, and it's interesting in the UK, everybody, absolutely everybody, on the left, the right, the center, they all believe that. In Germany, it's more varied. Italy is also more varied. You have people who have different views on the matter, also different views on how we should help, how long we should help, what the goal of the war is. The debates here are more varied and more distinguished, as opposed to the United Kingdom, where everybody has one view only. And I think Germany, in terms of its sort of culture, its sort of technical culture is very much like that. This was something invented by others. And, the digital, that's just, you can't see it, you can't, you don't know how it works, and it's sort of, it's mysterious. At least with machines, you can, even though they're complicated, but at least, there's something physical, you can touch them, there's a physical counterpart to them. And the diesel engines, it has lots of, I don't know what you call them, pistons and lots of things that move. And eventually, if you're sophisticated enough, you know what it is. But computers work very differently. Software works very differently. It's very sophisticated. It's not like it's not any level. And they thought they have a lower opinion of this. It's also to do with universities. You have to go to in Germany to sort of an elite university to study mechanical engineering. Software engineers are often self-trained. They're often not academics.
What is with in Berlin, I live in Berlin, I've been living there for 12 years now. There are a lot of startups and also some excellent spots for IA. What's not working? You say it in your book, no? There is not. It is not enough if you have good startups in the digital. You have to. You build a system, no? With the university and so on. And then there is another problem, which was the Inflation Reduction Act of Biden.
Yeah.
And this was. It was mostly discussed in Germany, not very much in Italy, which is a shame, because it really attracted a lot of industry. In America, not only because of course, but because it was quick and it would also solve a problem, which is a big problem, and you describe it very well in Germany, the bureaucracy, right?
Yeah.
So.
No, and the Inflation Reduction Act was, the Americans gave themselves, I think, $350 billion, and it was actual money. In Europe it's so different. When people promise money in Europe, like the European Commission has an 800 billion program, no one ever gets the money. It's just, a headline. And in Germany, trying to get any money from the state is very difficult. And if you are working for a small company, you have no chance of getting any money. You have to have a very large legal department who've done this before. So especially young companies have no access to this type of thing. And in America, they gave you the money. You just went there, and on the day you came, you got the money. And there wasn't like you had to fill out a form or anything. It was basically, they did all this for you. It's a completely different experience than Germany. And this is partly the EU. The EU has legislated a lot. But the Germans they took the EU legislation and what they gold-plated them. So they took it and made it harder and more bureaucratic. And whereas others have kind of done a little less. And Germany did it certainly more bureaucratic for anything to do with data protection, artificial intelligence regulation, crypto regulation, Digital Services Act. There was quite a lot of regulation on the technical area that made it very difficult. An example on AI. AI needs data. That's where the money comes from. But the GDPR, the data protection, forces companies to destroy data because we have to protect people. We don't not just anonymize data, which is obviously clear. You don't want to just give people names, but you don't want to necessarily destroy the data. So the idea that we have to destroy data is completely countercultural to AI and will make it very difficult for Europe to connect with AI. Mario Draghi wrote a very interesting article recently saying that we have imposed tariffs on ourselves on goods in Europe of approximately 40% because of all the regulation. And on services, it's even 100%. Forget the numbers, could be 80%, but services was much higher. This is what we did, but the Germans did more than the others. And it's something, the German bureaucracy works slightly, there is a, it is certainly much more, you also often suspected of frauding. I mean, after I published the book, there was I got an entrepreneur from the Benelux countries wrote to me, and he said he was producing these winter gardens, which is an extension to a house with glass, like a garden with glass walls. And he, when he came to, he founded a company in Germany, and it was a nightmare. He got audited. He got investigated by the Social Securities Commission. He said he was basically under permanent, attack by German bureaucracy. And then he decided after a year to close the company because he couldn't bear it any longer. And then it took him 3 years to get out, and he had to spend a lot of money to get a consultant to actually close down the company because all the workers, they enjoy protection, contracts enjoy protection. You can't just in Germany you can't just close down a company. He said he then went to Lithuania, which is also in the EU, but he did have no problems. It was just basically it was welcoming. He could open a company and sell all the products. And that's sort of typical of the. You mentioned Berlin has lots of startup companies, and so does Munich. These are the two places in Germany where you have a startup. Yeah, absolutely. There are also venture capitalists. Germany does actually have that. What Germany doesn't have is the next generation. I mean, Google was a startup. But then there was a period from the moment they were successful to the moment when they got the stock market listing, when they went from like 1 million in value to 1 billion. And it is that process going from a successful startup to a stock exchange listed company. That's the problem in Germany. That's where the money isn't there, where the capital isn't there. And we heard a lot from venture capitalists in Germany. They often act like bankers. They ask you for collateral. They ask for, they ask sort of business models about, business plans. I mean, all the bureaucracy that you have. Some of the best startups haven't got a business plan. If you had asked the founders of Google's what their business plan is, they would have kicked you out of the office because they didn't care about business plan. They had an algorithm, and that's what they had, and that was successful. It wasn't like they didn't start off with a commercial worked out example of how it would all happen. I mean, there was obviously the idea that search would generate advertising revenue. It was obviously a radical idea with massive potential, but they hadn't figured everything out. And it's the case with a lot of, like Facebook. If you hear the beginning is the story of Facebook, they were at the beginning, they didn't see this kind of AI-based, social media connector that they are today. This is the Twitter certainly started off as something very sort of light, and it came later. So it needed. What happened in the United States is there was a capital market behind this. The German banking system could not deliver this. It's this, the German banking system, and you also mentioned these sort of networks, and Germany is very good at this. But again, the networks play in exactly the same way. There's Volkswagen, the universities, the car companies, the Fraunhofer institutes, which do all the research. But it's a closed network. And if something doesn't get invented in the network, it doesn't get invented. And that's the difference to the American system. Google just, all these companies, they weren't part of existing networks. These were new companies. It wasn't the old companies that did the invention. And that's the difficulty. Germany was very much optimized for the existing infrastructure, for the companies, the big companies in Germany that were so successful there. And everything was done for those companies. But at the expense of new companies, at the expense of outsiders. And if you were a whistleblower, no chance. If you were outside the system, not in the consensus, you wouldn't be given a chance. And that's, we've realized also with our little newspaper that we created. You mentioned the FT Deutschland at the time. Germany is not hospitable to sort of outsiders. That's something, it's a cultural thing. It's very similar of the similar trend. It's very difficult. I mean, we tried hard, we pushed hard, and we were around for 10 years, so it was a reasonable. The paper had a reasonable run. It wasn't.
It's a shame, but I mean, we also learn it now because Italy, Unicredit wants to buy Commerzbank, and I think the most astonishing thing is not the unions, of course. The unions have, and the unions, by the way, the same unions that went on the street to say we don't want to be bought by Unicredit. They didn't go on the street a few weeks ago when Commerzbank said they have to cut a lot of workers. No, so I mean, there's really a systematic hostility. I mean, the chapter about the banks is one of my favorite because the banks are like my obsession in Germany because I think it is an incredible saga, You have this very close relationship between the banks and the politics. It's so close that when Ackermann, which was the former CEO of Deutsche Bank, which was one of the most dangerous banks in the world, and it's still full of, shit, in the balance sheets. When he turned 50, Angela Merkel was chancellor. She organized his birthday party at the chancellor, at the Kanzleramt. No? I mean, this is something you wouldn't see, I think, in America. Not so easily. Right. I don't know. Maybe now, of course, with Trump and Musk and so on, you see this. But this is one of my favorite chapters because also Wirecard was an incredible story. It looked like a systemic, mafioso omertà story about a whole system with the authorities, the journalists, the analysts, everyone like being against a newspaper, the most important financial newspaper in the world, the Financial Times, because it had said, "Where's the money?" To Wirecard. But we don't have much time for, I would say, 10 minutes to spend about two other, I think, very important topics before we go to your questions. Russia and China. I mean, Russia, we have always told the tale about the Ostpolitik. This German sensibility towards, especially the Social Democratic Party, because Germany was a divided country. So of course, at the end of the 60s, Willy Brandt started with this Ostpolitik, which was a bigger comprehension of the reasons of the Eastern Germans, of Moscow, of the Warsaw Pact. It was an attempt to get closer to the communist countries, of course. And I think it was very important for many families. You say it also for my family. I mean, we had part of the family in Dresden. It was very important also to us. But now, this Ostpolitik is a lot about corruption, about a former chancellor who has been in Putin's pockets, let's say it, since the 90s, no? Gerhard Schröder. I mean, and about Schröder's friends. You mentioned them a lot. Yeah. And some months ago, I discovered, together with a German journalist who's not in the Klüngel, And we discovered that Matthias Platzek had gone to Moscow informally, but to do what? And then 1 month later, there was a strange phone call between Olaf Scholz and Vladimir Putin in November, and nobody understood the reason of this. But it was prepared, because Platzek and some CDU guys and so on, they had gone to Moscow, they had met people who are now under sanctions, you know, people of the entourage of Putin. And we have multiple sources confirming this, but this is not Ostpolitik, no? This is something different, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the Ostpolitik was that was 1970s. This was about, you know, Germany was divided. It was about, you know, getting families together. This is a different, what happened there. I mean, the relationship with Russia, Schröder recognized early on that after 9/11 and the extreme reaction by Bush, that Germany was could no longer rely on the United States as a sort of as a partner. Initially, he was very pro-American, but with he supported America over Afghanistan. Germany sent troops to Afghanistan, but he did not support Bush over Iraq. So by 2003, when the Iraq War started, Germany had decoupled from the United States ideologically, and Schröder had become friends with Putin. And they were both young, they were both starting in politics, and their families spent holidays together, so it became an alliance, and Germany and Russia built these pipelines. That was became Schröder's life work after he left the Chancellery in 2005. And there is a whole infrastructure, including Germany's current president, Frank-Walter Steinmeier, who was the main orchestrator of connections with Russia. You mentioned Matthias Platzek, a former SPD chairman. He was very big in the Russia links, as were a number of others. And some of them are still big in politics, like Manuela Schwesig. She was very strongly involved with this. Virtually all the East German Social Democrats, and many of the CDU too. I mean, Italy too. You had your people, no? I mean, Berlusconi was close to the Russians, so it's not strange to this. But the Germans did a lot more. They did a lot more business, especially the gas and the pipeline. That was really very, very big. And for Schröder, this was, this is how he wanted to save Germany's industrial model. He said, if we get the cheap, he made the labor cheaper through his reforms, and if he made the energy cheaper through his things with gas, he kind of had it nailed. These were the two pillars on which Germany's kind of, industrial model, even though it wasn't cutting-edge technology, would still work. What they didn't think is that they never thought the pipeline would go the way it did. They never thought geopolitics would intrude. Merkel resisted this to the end, and Scholz resisted this initially. It was only after Putin invaded Ukraine that they had to give this up. But until the day they didn't, and they were basically defending the system. So yeah, the relationship with Russia was, there was also this annual St. Petersburg forum where politicians, and it's a bit like the Davos of the East, where a lot of Germans and Russians got together, and it was like pretty much the same quality. And it was a very big business, and there was an association in Germany, the Eastern Committee of German Industry. I compared them with they're very powerful. They had all the big companies in it, like a huge influential lobbying group that basically promoted all this Russia business. I compared them in the book to America's National Rifle Association. The gun lobby in America that always makes sure that everybody, equally powerful. They would bribe MPs, they would have parts of the entire parliament in their pocket. So as you said rightly, these are sort of mafia-like structures, and there was a lot of bribery money, especially when it comes to Russia, contacts, underhand contacts. Not surprised to hear that Matthias Platzek would meet with sanctioned people to organize a phone call with Olaf Scholz. Probably Scholz told him, I want no fingerprints. No?
Also, they after the invasion of the Ukraine, of course, they don't meet anymore, the Petersburg in Russia, but they meet like in Azerbaijan. So, the same people. With people who are under sanctions, and there are CDU and SPD guys, but top guys. They have no formal rule now, but Platzek, of course, you know it. He's a very influential guy. He was the chief of the German-Russian Forum, so it's incredible.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I think you will find. So this, and as you also rightly said, some of the politicians, some of the old, when a German politician retires or is voted out of office, they become lobbyists. Half of them became Russian lobbyists, the other half became China lobbyists. So the China lobbyists, there was another Rudolf Scharping, another SPD chairman. All these SPD chairmen, or former SPD, they were all basically in one or the other camp. And Scharping was the big China guy. And he got people together, they did business and, lucrative jobs. And, his consultancy is very successful, connecting Germany with China. And they absolutely hated this geopolitical shift because Germany was not prepared for that.
Yeah. So, exactly. So maybe if we have we have 2 minutes. So I would maybe give 2 minutes before we give you the opportunity to pose some questions. Or you can do it already. If you have some questions, just raise your hand, and here's a question there and in the first one. I would take 2 questions maybe, and then you can answer them together, no?
Just a quick one. I read that Merz has been working after politics in 2009, has been working in BlackRock, so one of the biggest financial company with assets of $11 trillion. Do you think that this will impact his way of doing politics? And if yes, how? Thank you.
Okay, let me just quickly answer this. I think it will. I think Merz has actually said something very similar to what I wrote in the book. He's the only German politician I have ever heard saying the model is broken. So he also thinks the model is kaput. And that's why he wants to fix it. So at least there's a recognition. And the only people who think that are people who have a slightly, view from the outside. And it kind of helped him, because he was basically outside of politics for like 10 years. And it helped him to take a different perspective. In that sense, it's quite good. The problem with Merz, as we saw in the last few weeks, he's not very diplomatic. He is not a great negotiator. He didn't get a great deal, actually. This is not the best deal he could have had. And he makes a lot of enemies unnecessarily. We don't know how successful he will be in Europe. Maybe, maybe not. It's impossible to say. We have to see. I'm skeptical, but the idea that he is from outside, journalists don't like this. I think this is probably his best quality.
Here in the first row, there is a question.
Good evening, Mr. Münchau. I have a political question for you. It's a dystopic future, and I don't hope so. But I want to better understand the spreading of the Nazi parties in Deutschland. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, yeah, the AfD, the Alternative for Germany, I wouldn't call them a Nazi party, but they have Nazis in them. They have been tolerant of Nazis party, and they got 22% in the election. So that's a big result. They don't get into government. There's sort of this firewall that everyone had against them. I'm not a big fan of firewalls. I think firewalls lead to a situation where these parties on the fringes become very, very strong because they're never in power. They can be radical, and radical messages always look good until you're in power. And once you're in power, then we'll see what they're like. they will never have the chance to get into power, so they will remain forever attractive. And the same is with the Left Party. And if you add the votes together, the Left Party and the AfD together have 1/3 of the MPs, of the parliamentarians, so they have a blocking minority. So the German parliament is more radical than it ever was since the Second World War. And it will become more difficult to govern, that's for sure. Now, and I think they will grow. They're not going to go away. So next election, I would expect them to be big. I mean, things can happen, but I would expect them to be stronger than they are today. Because I don't think this government is going to solve the problems. And if they don't solve the problems, and to solve the problems, you need to kind of have daring reforms. You need to actually, rethink the way the country works. You need to say, okay, let's try something different, and let's, give some new ideas a chance. There isn't much of that. There's money. They will fix the trains, the railways, which are terrible. They will fix this. I'm pretty sure they'll fix this. And maybe the horse will no longer win the competition with the internet, that kind of stuff. But I don't think German companies will be much better. And so I would think that the far right and the far left will continue to do very well in Germany. It's a good environment for them. And and I think they will eventually be in power in some form or other, maybe as a junior coalition partner. The firewall will eventually go. It's a bit like the debt brake. They hold it up, and it's like something they will never change, and then one day they will change it. And then I think it could happen in 4 years' time.
So you don't think that this huge plan, 500 billion for investments, and the defense, which might be also innovation, no? You don't think that this will in any way change these structural problems that you recognize in the book? But I mean,
no, the structural problems are not the result of them not spending enough.
No, sure, but
that's part of it, but not the main part of it. The main part, I mean, if the Volkswagen is still not a more modern car because you spent a bit more money.
No, but one of the pillars was this conservatism on the fiscal side. So if this is gone, I mean, something could happen also on the innovation, maybe, no,
I don't think so. I think the book. I mean, look, the structural things like the finance, the innovation, the kind of championship of the old companies, the bureaucracy that the new that all is not going to change. The only thing that's going to change is that the public sector will invest more money, and that's a good thing. Don't think of the 500 billion now. This is 500 billion over 12 years. That's 40 billion a year. I'm not sure they will spend that much. It's going to be in addition to what they already spend. They're already spending 50 billion on infrastructure. And that's maybe not enough, and maybe they would spend another 10 or 15. I'd be surprised if they could spend the entire amount that is allocated, because it's actually not, as you find in Italy as well, with the recovery fund from the EU, the Next Generation program, it's actually not that easy to invest. I mean, you need to have projects, you need to have the building companies, you need to have everything in place. Most projects are not shovel ready, so most EU countries struggled to use also the structural funds of the EU, and many structural funds did not get used for that reason. The military is a very similar situation, and people say, okay, we spend now whatever it takes on the military. But the big problem in Germany, if you wanted to make a big military, is the young people. There are not many young people who want to be soldiers and die. And it's not sort of an attractive proposition. And it's also interesting that the people who are most in favor of reintroducing the draft are people from the left who themselves avoided the draft, especially the Greens. I don't think any of the Greens ever went to the Bundeswehr, the army, but they're kind of the most belligerent in terms of the military support. So I'm a little bit skeptical about, and you see this in Ukraine, the big bottleneck in Ukraine at the moment isn't Western weapons, it is the people, the soldiers. And Germany has an army of 180,000. They want to get to 240,000. Maybe they recruit some more. Maybe they do the draft. But it's going to be difficult for them to spend 2-3% of GDP on the military when you don't have that many soldiers out there. It's not just, you can buy another weapon system, but you need, what's the point of having, 100 F-16 fighter planes when you don't have any pilots to fly them? So your bottleneck in Germany, I predict, is not the fiscal side, it's the people. And you have bottlenecks in both funds. So you have bottlenecks in the military and you have bottlenecks in the infrastructure. So I think that everybody's very excited about, okay, the debt brake is broken. However, I don't think the effect will be as big as people hope it will. It will have an effect. I'm not saying it's nothing. It will, they will stop making stupid decisions about infrastructure, like, stop projects altogether because they've run out of money. That won't happen anymore. But I don't think it will be the answer to the question or the solution to the problem. I think to solve the problem, you would have to take what we have now and then start doing the reforms. Change the financial sector, change the incentives in the financial sector, also change some of the social welfare systems, change the way we deal with foreigners coming into Germany, trying to be specialist workers. Germany is not very welcoming to non-Germans. It's very difficult for them, and there's also the language requirements. It's they're making it harder than it should be. There's a lot of reforms, bureaucracy. Really. Needs to, that's what they really should be talking about. And I see nothing in the SPD-CDU coalition talks that is even addressing them. So I would not expect an increase in the growth rate, except for the very short term where those new government spending will come. So there will be 25 will be flat again, but 26 and 27 will be better years. So there will be a pickup in growth that will relate to fiscal policy, but it will then flatten out again. Germany's potential growth rate at the moment is about the same as Italy's. The IMF has a forecast, sort of what they call a 5-year forecast. This is not really a forecast of what happens in 5 years. It's their estimate of the structural medium-term, growth potential. And it's 0.7% for Italy, and it's 0.7% for Germany, and it's way below the average in Europe. And this is the metric of structural shifts. Maybe it will go up a little bit. Military spending, there's Rheinmetall, there are new companies that might benefit from this.
The new
Volkswagen. I'm not saying it has a zero effect. It will have some effect. But it's not going to, and even the defense industry is not big, will never be big enough to make up for the deindustrialization that happens in other sectors. They will pick up a few jobs from the car industry. And if you make an SUV, and an armored vehicle, I guess there is an overlap in technology. But it's not it's not like that the defense industry, that tanks will replace all the cars. That's just not going to happen.
You're not going to fill also the technological divide. Other question?
Talking about the crisis of a car industry, not just in Germany, but also in Europe, according to you, what is the only thing maybe they can do to try at least to save part of the occupation?
Well, I think we've lost the game. That's the first realization. That it doesn't mean we have to kind of give up, but we have to realize that we're not going to catch up on our own. What I would suggest would be very controversial. So it's not it's nobody's policy. I think we should become the junior partners of China. That's our best bet. The Chinese can sell their products into Europe. We'll help them because we have we still have the keys, the gates. We control that, and they have the technology, and we give them what we have local content. We will obviously we will produce what they're not producing. So the engines will be ours, even though there isn't a lot of money in it, but at least it will help. I think it's for us better to team up with the Chinese But obviously, geopolitically, this isn't so easy now. So I mean, I don't think. I think our relationship with Donald Trump is not going to improve if we did this. So we have to be very clear-headed about this. And that's why I think it's good for us to spend more money on defense, because we need to become more independent, and we need to become more independent so we can make our own decisions. That's, I think, the important thing for Europe, that we become kind of also self-confident, and that we say, it's not that we no longer ask the question who we are with, but what is in our interest, that we act a bit like others as well, rather than, oh, we are with the Americans, or we are with the Chinese, or we are with the Russians. That's basically the way it's been going for the last 20 years. It's always like, the Germans were with the Russians, and that's not a good thing. I think, we should have relationships with everybody, but the primary goal should be to support our interests. I always thought of the Euro and the EU as a geopolitical, as a sort of a vehicle to support our interests, rather than just as a soft power project. And I always thought that wouldn't work.
I think we can take another question, not more. There was, sorry, but you already asked a question, maybe.
I refer to the world reputation of the German products. German has a great reputation, is #1 factory, manufacturing quality of so many products. Let's say not only cars, but in the chemistry field, in the big infrastructure. Germany has built the first high-speed, fast train line in Shanghai, for instance. And still the brand Germany is very strong in the world, considering the quality of the product, because you are really, let's say, a great manufacturing country. First of all, very affordable, trustful, and you have a very good reputation worldwide. So regarding the big competition right now of the Chinese product that is entering the European market with lower prices, much more competitive price than German production, we know that we are a social economy that is affected from a lot of social securities compared to the United States, that is a pure economy. And we are not a communist area like Chinese or Russian. Which are the means that German can still continue to apply in order to take far away or to face the competition with the Chinese products?
I give you an example. I mean, Germany makes very good products. That's absolutely right. The manufacturing is of a very high quality. I mean, take cameras. Famous product. Now, the Germans still have a famous camera maker, Leica, and it's very expensive, but it's sort of, they've gone radically upmarket. They were just a professional tool. Today, they're not a professional tool anymore. They're almost a collector's item. A bit like Swiss watches. There used to be watches that people would buy. Today, it's jewelry. And you have a lot of, so it's a radical move up market, still high quality production. Obviously some people use it still, but it's sort of it's a slightly different market. I was buying a coffee mill the other day, and a high quality coffee grinder and manual grinder, and they are surprisingly complicated. And you will not be surprised to hear that the Germans were the market leader in this area. But I ended up buying a Chinese product. Now, the Chinese had a lot of cheap coffee grinders before, but they moved into the same market as the Germans. So this one was comparable with the best of the Germans. It was, it had the steel, the thing that grinds, and it's surprisingly complicated. But it is a purely mechanical product, and it needs some high quality steel, and it needs to be, woven in a certain, or structured in a certain way. It's a precision instrument, actually. And the Chinese can do this too. And that has been the biggest, and they know how to manufacture. There is no reason to think, the fact that Germany had a reputation that's fine, but they're not the only ones who can manufacture, especially now in this age of AI-supported industry. And I would think that China will overtake Germany in terms of quality control through AI, because China is developing the AI, the industrial AI, faster than Germany. And the main ingredient you need for industrial AI, i.e. what they call Industry 4.0, this is the Internet of Things, the AI that will actually happen in factories. And there will be sensors in every node of the production line. This will go to data centers, and it will produce information for optimization of factory lines, all that. The Chinese are ahead in this because they are on the development of 6G telephony, which is the technical requirement for this. And this will be a version of, you will find that this will produce the quality of manufacturing. Chinese people are good engineers. We've been training them in Germany, in the UK, in Italy, and they've been here. They're not imitating anymore. That was 20 years ago. So, Sure. I mean, I'm not denying.
That's a great advantage.
And we are also great designers. We are great designers. Absolutely. You buy a Ferrari, and obviously you get something that no Chinese company can produce. I completely agree with that. But that's the thing. It's the Ferrari. It's the Porsche. It's the Leica camera. It's the upmarket of the upmarket segment. And I think there will be that in the car industry as well. There will be a Mercedes or a BMW that will cost 300,000 euros, and that will be very successful. But it won't be a Volkswagen Golf. It won't be these mass-produced cars like the Cinquecento. It won't be that anymore, or the Mini, or the kind of stuff we did in the past so successfully. The wealth of the German car industry is based on the small to medium-sized cars. The innovation came from the top cars, and then it trickled down to the medium-sized cars. This is where the Germans did well, and where they made most of their money is the Volkswagen Golfs and that brand of company. And that is the part of the market into which the Chinese are encroaching. And so that will push the Germans upmarket. And there is a tank is an upmarket car. You can think about this. I mean, there's an awful lot of what you're seeing here. It goes upmarket. It's very successful, but it will be a lot smaller. And I think that's the difference. So I'm just saying that's why the economy can no longer really. I'm not against this. I'm not anti-industry. My family, they're all engineers. So I'm not. I have nothing. I'm full of admiration for this. I'm merely saying that big thing that we have is going to be smaller. And we need to be open up for other stuff. You can also do if you're an engineer, you don't have to produce. You can also design. Production is not something that you need to have in where you work. There are many, like in America. The Americans design the chips. The Taiwanese make the chips. It's not a necessarily bad share of labor, because both things have different skills. So I think there is a lot of possibilities, but the requirement is that we open up.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Wolfgang Münchau. I remind you. His book, Kaput, La fine del Miracolo Tedesco, in the Italian translation. And thank you so much. Buon proseguimento a voi.